The children represented the future of the monarchy, while their grandfather represented the wisdom and experience that would guide them as they grew into their own royal roles. As the most sacred part of the ceremony concluded, the entire Wales family felt connected not only to each other, but to centuries of British tradition and history. They understood that they were part of something much bigger than themselves, and that their love for each other was what would help them carry out their duties with grace and dignity in the years to come. After the magnificent coronation ceremony concluded at Westminster Abbey, the Wales family joined King Charles for the journey back to Buckingham Palace, where thousands of people had gathered along the Mall waiting to see their new king and the royal family. The crowds were even larger than they had been in the morning, with people packed together as far as the eye could see, all waving flags and cheering with excitement for this historic celebration. The royal procession through London was absolutely spectacular as the newly crowned King Charles rode in the magnificent gold state coach, surrounded by hundreds of soldiers in their bright red uniforms and gleaming helmets. William, Catherine, and their 3 children followed in their own elegant carriage, waving to the enthusiastic crowds who had waited hours in the sunshine just to catch a glimpse of the royal family on this momentous day. Prince George sat up very straight in the carriage, still wearing his Page of Honor uniform, and feeling incredibly proud of how well he had performed his important duties during the ceremony. The 9-year-old prince waved regally to the crowds, understanding that he was representing not just his family, but the future of the British monarchy. His serious expression and dignified behavior showed that he truly understood the significance of the day. Princess Charlotte was absolutely glowing with excitement as she waved enthusiastically at all the people who had come to celebrate her grandfather's coronation. The 8-year-old princess had practiced her royal wave many times, but nothing could have prepared her for the incredible feeling of seeing thousands of people cheering and celebrating. Her natural charm and genuine smile made the crowds cheer even louder when they saw her in the carriage. Little Prince Louis was bouncing with excitement as he looked out at the amazing scenes along their route back to Buckingham Palace. The 5-year-old had never seen so many people in one place, and he was fascinated by all the colorful flags and decorations that filled the streets of London. He waved energetically at everyone he could see, often with both hands at the same time, which made the crowds absolutely love him. When they finally arrived at Buckingham Palace, the family went inside to prepare for the traditional balcony appearance that millions of people around the world were waiting to see on television. Catherine helped the children freshen up and made sure their ceremonial outfits still looked perfect after the long day of activities. She knew that this balcony moment would be photographed and remembered forever. The famous balcony at Buckingham Palace had been the setting for so many historic royal moments over the years, and today it would welcome King Charles for his first appearance as the officially crowned monarch. The family gathered together behind the tall glass doors that led out to the balcony, while palace staff made final preparations for their public appearance. King Charles looked absolutely magnificent in his ceremonial robes as he prepared to step out onto the balcony with his family beside him. The newly crowned king was beaming with joy and pride as he looked at his son-daughter-in-law and 3 grandchildren who had all played such important roles in making his coronation day perfect. He felt overwhelmed with gratitude for their love and support. When the glass doors finally opened and the royal family stepped out onto the famous balcony, the crowd below erupted in the loudest cheers and applause that London had heard in many years. The sea of people stretched from the palace gates all the way down the Mall, creating an incredible sight that took everyone's breath away. Thousands of cameras flashed as people tried to capture this historic moment. Charlotte waved gracefully at the enormous crowd, clearly enjoying every moment of this incredible experience. She felt like a real princess from one of her favorite fairy tales as she stood on the famous balcony with her family, surrounded by so much love and celebration. The 8-year-old had never imagined that so many people could gather in one place just to celebrate her grandfather. The combination of Louis' innocent mischief and his obvious love for his family created some of the most heartwarming moments of the entire coronation ceremony. People watching around the world were charmed by his authentic reactions and his refusal to pretend to be anything other than exactly who he was, a delightful little boy, sharing an extraordinary day with his family. As the coronation ceremony reached its most sacred and important moments, something completely unplanned and beautiful happened that would be remembered as one of the most touching parts of the entire day. King Charles had just received the Stedward crown and was sitting on the ancient coronation chair when he looked out into the congregation, and his eyes found his three beloved grandchildren sitting with their parents in the front section of Westminster Abbey. The newly crowned king face immediately lit up with pure joy and overwhelming love despite the incredible solemnity and formality of the moment. All the weight of ceremony and tradition seemed to disappear as King Charles simply became a grandfather looking at the three children who meant the world to him. His expression showed such genuine happiness and pride that everyone in the abbey could feel the powerful emotion radiating from him. Prince George stood tall and proud with the other pages of honor, having performed his duties absolutely perfectly throughout the entire ceremony. The 9-year-old prince had not made a single mistake and had carried himself with the dignity and responsibility that would serve him well when he became king himself many years in the future. Seeing his grandfather look at him with such love and approval made George feel incredibly proud of his important contribution to this historic day. Princess Charlotte sat perfectly still in her beautiful pale blue dress, understanding instinctively that this was the most important moment of the entire ceremony. The 8-year-old princess had maintained her composure beautifully throughout the long service, and now she felt overwhelmed with emotion as she watched her grandfather officially become the king. She could see the love in his eyes when he looked at her, and she felt so proud to be part of this amazing royal family. Even little Prince Louis seemed to sense that something very special was happening during this sacred moment. The 5-year-old, who had been fidgeting and making funny faces throughout much of the ceremony, became completely still and quiet. His small hand reached out instinctively for his mother, and he held onto Catherine's fingers tightly, as if he understood that this moment was different from all the playful times that had come before. William felt completely overwhelmed with emotion as he watched his father being crowned and realized that the crown would someday rest on his own head. The weight of history and responsibility felt both exciting and terrifying as he thought about what the future would hold for his family. He looked at his 3 children and wondered how they would handle the incredible duties and privileges that came with being born into the royal family. Catherine squeezed Louis' small hand gently and felt tears of joy and pride filling her eyes as she watched this incredible moment unfold. She was grateful beyond words that her children could witness this historic day and be part of their grandfather's most important moment. She knew that they would carry these memories with them for the rest of their lives, and that this day would help them understand their place in the long line of British royal history. The Archbishop's voice rang out clearly through Westminster Abbey as he spoke the final words that officially made Charles the King of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth nations. Every person in the ancient building understood that they were witnessing history being made, and that this moment would be talked about and remembered for generations to come. The connection between the new king and his family was so obvious and moving that it added an extra layer of meaning to the ceremony. King Charles continued to look at his grandchildren with obvious love and affection, even as the formal parts of the ceremony continued around him. The cameras captured these beautiful moments of genuine family connection that showed the world that underneath all the crowns and ceremonies, the royal family was bound together by the same love that connects all families. These were not just formal relationships, but deep bonds of affection that transcended all the pomp and circumstance. The moment felt timeless, as if the ancient walls of Westminster Abbey were witnessing not just the crowning of a new king, but the celebration of a family that had served Britain for generations and would continue to do so for many more years to come. The Wales family breakfast was unlike any other morning they had ever experienced together. Catherine had asked the kitchen staff to prepare the children's favorite foods, hoping it would help keep them calm and happy before the big ceremony. George sat at the table eating his porridge, very carefully making sure not to spill anything on his morning clothes. He kept asking his father about the exact timing of events at Westminster Abbey and what he should do if something went wrong during his duties as a page of honor. William patiently answered every question while buttering toast for Charlotte, who was too excited to sit still for very long. She kept getting up from her chair to practice her curtsy in front of the dining room mirror. Her movements were graceful and perfect, just like her mother had taught her during their many practice sessions. Charlotte wanted everything to be absolutely perfect when she met all the important guests who would be attending the coronation ceremony. Little Prince Louis was having his own adventure with his breakfast cereal, making airplane noises as he moved his spoon through the milk. Catherine gently reminded him to eat properly, but she could not help smiling at his innocent playfulness. She knew that keeping Louis calm and well-behaved during the long ceremony would be her biggest challenge of the day. The 5-year-old had a reputation for creating memorable moments during formal royal events. After breakfast, the real preparations began as each family member needed to get dressed in their special ceremonial outfits. William went to his dressing room where his formal military uniform was waiting perfectly pressed and ready. The uniform was heavy with medals and decorations that represented his military service and royal duties. As he put on each piece, he thought about his father and how proud he felt that King Charles was finally getting his moment to shine after waiting so many years. Catherine helped Charlotte into her beautiful pale blue dress that had been specially designed for the coronation. The little princess stood very still as her mother carefully arranged the dress and fixed her hair with the special ribbons they had chosen that morning. Charlotte looked in the mirror and gasped with delight at how grown-up and elegant she appeared. She practiced her wave and her curtsy one more time while her mother watched with tears of pride in her eyes. George was getting dressed in his page of honor uniform with help from his father and a member of the household staff. The young prince looked incredibly mature and responsible in his ceremonial outfit. He studied himself in the mirror and asked his father if he looked dignified enough for such an important job. William assured his eldest son that he looked perfect and reminded him of all the practice they had done together. The biggest challenge was getting Louis ready without him getting too excited or distracted. Catherine had learned that keeping him busy with small tasks helped him focus better. She asked him to help choose which shoes looked best with his outfit and to check that his hair was combed properly. Louis took these jobs very seriously and felt very important, helping his mother get ready for Grandpa's special day. As the family gathered in the main hallway of Adelaide Cottage, they looked absolutely magnificent together. The photographers who were allowed to take pictures before they left captured beautiful images of the family looking elegant and united. Catherine looked at her 3 children and her husband feeling overwhelming pride and love. They were about to become part of history, and she wanted to remember every single detail of these precious moments before they left their quiet home and entered the public eye where millions of people would be watching their every move. The royal cars pulled up to Adelaide Cottage exactly on schedule as the Wales family prepared to leave for the most important journey of their lives. The sleek black vehicles gleamed in the morning sunlight, and the drivers stood at attention waiting to transport the future king and his family to Westminster Abbey. Catherine took one last look around their peaceful home, knowing that when they returned everything would be different because King Charles would officially be their monarch. George climbed into the first car with his parents, looking every inch the responsible young prince he was meant to be. His page of honor uniform fit him perfectly, and he sat up very straight, practicing the serious expression he would need during the ceremony. William sat beside his eldest son, feeling proud of how mature George had become and how well he was handling the pressure of his important role in the coronation. Charlotte settled into her seat with great care, making sure her beautiful dress did not wrinkle during the journey to Westminster Abbey. She had her small purse with her containing a comb and lip balm that her mother had given her for touch-ups if needed. The 8-year-old princess felt very grown-up, carrying her own special bag just like the adult ladies would have at the ceremony. Prince Louis bounced slightly in his seat despite his parents' gentle reminders to sit still and be careful with his ceremonial outfit. The 5-year-old was amazed by all the police motorcycles that surrounded their cars and the way traffic seemed to disappear as they drove through London. He pressed his face against the window, trying to see everything at once and asking countless questions about all the people lining the streets. The drive through London was absolutely magical, as thousands and thousands of people had gathered along their route to catch a glimpse of the royal family. Many people had been waiting since the early hours of the morning, holding flags and signs celebrating King Charles' coronation. The crowds cheered and waved enthusiastically when they spotted the royal cars passing by, and Catherine felt overwhelmed by the love and support from the British people. William pointed out famous landmarks to his children as they drove past, sharing stories about the history of each building and monument. He showed them Buckingham Palace, where they would return later for the traditional balcony appearance that millions of people around the world would be watching. George listened carefully to every word. His father said, understanding that he was learning about his future inheritance and responsibilities. Charlotte waved gracefully at the crowds through the car window, just as her mother had taught her during their practice sessions at home. Her natural charm and sweet smile made people cheer even louder when they saw the young princess acknowledging their presence. She felt like a real princess from a fairy tale, riding through London in a royal carriage, surrounded by so much love and celebration. The closer they got to Westminster Abbey, the more impressive the crowds became, and the more real it felt that they were about to witness and participate in a ceremony that would be remembered throughout British history. Louis had calmed down somewhat as he watched the amazing scenes outside their car windows. Even his young mind could understand that something very special and important was happening today. Catherine held Charlotte's hand gently while keeping an eye on Louis to make sure he remained calm during the journey. She felt nervous excitement building in her chest as Westminster Abbey came into view. The ancient building looked absolutely magnificent, decorated with beautiful flowers and surrounded by thousands of people who had come from all over the world to witness King Charles' coronation. As their cars slowed down approaching the Abbey entrance, Catherine took a deep breath and reminded her children that they were about to become part of something truly historic. She told them to remember these moments forever, because they would tell their own children and grandchildren about the day their great-grandfather became king and how proud they felt to be part of such an amazing royal family. The magnificent organ music filled every corner of Westminster Abbey as the coronation ceremony officially began, with all the grandeur and tradition that had been carefully planned for months. King Charles entered the ancient building wearing his beautiful ceremonial robes that sparkled with gold thread and precious jewels. He walked slowly and majestically down the long aisle, while nearly 2,000 guests rose to their feet in respect for their future monarch. Prince George stood perfectly straight with the other pages of honor as they prepared to fulfill their very important duties during the ceremony. The 9-year-old prince had practiced this moment countless times, but nothing could have prepared him for the incredible feeling of actually being part of such a historic event. He carefully held the heavy ceremonial robes exactly as he had been taught, and his face showed complete concentration and determination to do his job perfectly. The Archbishop of Canterbury began speaking the ancient words that had been used in coronation ceremonies for hundreds of years. His voice echoed powerfully through the abbey as he explained the sacred duties and responsibilities that King Charles would promise to fulfill as the monarch of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth countries. Every word carried the weight of centuries of tradition and history. Charlotte sat between her parents in their special seats near the front of the abbey, with her eyes wide with wonder as she watched her grandfather participate in this amazing ceremony. She had learned about coronations in her history lessons, but seeing it happen in real life was far more magical and impressive than she had ever imagined. The 8-year-old princess sat very still, trying to remember every detail so she could tell her friends about this incredible day. Prince Louis started the ceremony beautifully, sitting quietly beside his mother and watching everything with the fascination that only a 5-year-old could have. He was amazed by the colorful robes and the golden crowns and the way everyone spoke in such serious, important voices. Catherine kept a gentle hand on his shoulder, ready to help him if he became restless, but she was pleased to see him behaving so well during these first important moments. The choir began singing the most beautiful hymns that seemed to lift everyone's spirits up toward the magnificent ceiling of Westminster Abbey. The music was so powerful and moving that many guests felt tears in their eyes as they witnessed this sacred ceremony. William felt overwhelmed with emotion as he watched his father taking the solemn oaths that would make him the official king of their country. George performed his duties as a page of honor with absolute perfection, moving at exactly the right moments and helping to arrange King Charles' robes with the careful precision that his parents had taught him. The young prince felt incredibly proud to be helping his grandfather during the most important day of his life. He could see his parents watching him with obvious pride and love from their seats in the congregation. The ancient rituals continued with readings from the Bible and prayers that had been carefully chosen for this special ceremony. Religious leaders from different faiths participated in the service, showing how the modern monarchy respected and included people from all backgrounds and beliefs. The ceremony was both deeply traditional and refreshingly inclusive, reflecting the kind of king that Charles wanted to be. Catherine watched her 3 children with growing pride as they all handled this formal and lengthy ceremony much better than she had dared to hope. George was performing his official duties flawlessly while Charlotte sat with perfect posture and appropriate reverence for the sacred nature of the event. Even Louis was managing to stay relatively calm and quiet, though she could see he was starting to fidget slightly as the ceremony continued. The most sacred moments of the coronation were approaching as the Archbishop prepared to place the Stedward crown on King Charles' head. This was the moment that everyone had been waiting for, and the Abbey fell completely silent except for the Archbishop's voice. The weight of 1,000 years of British history seemed to settle over Westminster Abbey as the crown was lifted high for everyone to see. William felt his heart racing as he realized that someday he would be sitting in that same chair having a crown placed on his own head. He looked at his children and wondered what they were thinking as they watched their grandfather become king. He knew that this moment would stay with them forever and help them understand the incredible responsibility and privilege of being born into the royal family. The ceremony continued with more prayers and blessings as King Charles officially became the monarch of the United Kingdom. Every person in Westminster Abbey understood that they were witnessing history being made and that this day would be remembered and talked about for generations to come. About halfway through the long and formal coronation ceremony, 5-year-old Prince Louis began to show signs of the playful behavior that had made him famous during previous royal events. The little prince had been sitting quietly for much longer than anyone had expected, but his natural energy and curiosity were starting to take over. He began by making small funny faces at his sister Charlotte, who was sitting right next to him, trying very hard to maintain her perfect princess behavior. Charlotte noticed her little brother's silly expressions and had to bite her lip to keep from giggling out loud during the solemn ceremony. She knew that laughing would not be appropriate during such an important and sacred event, but Louis was being so adorable that it was almost impossible to keep a straight face. She tried to give him a stern look that said he should behave properly, but this only made him make even funnier faces at her. When the magnificent choir began singing particularly loudly during one of the most powerful hymns, Louis' dramatic reaction was to cover both his ears with his small hands. His face showed genuine surprise at how incredibly loud and powerful the music was in the ancient abbey. The 5-year-old had never heard anything quite so overwhelming, and his honest reaction made several nearby guests smile despite the formal nature of the ceremony. Catherine immediately noticed her youngest son's dramatic response to the choir and gently reached over to guide his hands down from his ears. She whispered very softly in his ear, explaining that the beautiful music was part of the special ceremony for Grandpa. Louis nodded seriously as if he understood completely, but within moments he was back to his playful ways, looking around the abbey with wide, curious eyes. The ceremonial program that had been given to each guest became Louis' next source of entertainment as he began folding it into different interesting shapes, while his mother tried to keep him focused on the ceremony. He created what looked like a paper airplane and then folded it into something that might have been a boat or perhaps a hat. His small fingers worked with the concentration of an artist completely absorbed in his creative project. William caught sight of his youngest son's paper-folding activities and gave him a gentle but firm look that clearly meant Louis should put the program down and pay attention to the important ceremony. This worked for exactly 30 seconds before Louis found a new way to entertain himself by swinging his legs back and forth under his seat and looking around at all the distinguished guests with obvious curiosity. The cameras that were broadcasting the coronation to millions of people around the world began focusing on little Prince Louis, as his adorable antics provided a wonderful contrast to the formal solemnity of the ancient ceremony. Television viewers fell in love with his natural, honest reactions and his complete lack of pretense. He was simply being the normal 5-year-old boy who happened to be attending the most important royal event in decades. Louis' next memorable moment came when he let out a big dramatic yawn that seemed to come from his toes. The little prince had been awake since early morning, and the long ceremony combined with the warm temperature inside the packed abbey was making him feel sleepy. His yawn was so genuine and sweet that even some of the most serious dignitaries had to suppress smiles. Catherine tried various gentle strategies to keep Louis engaged, including pointing out interesting details about the ceremony and whispering little facts about what was happening. She had prepared some quiet activities in her small purse, but in the formal setting of Westminster Abbey, it was difficult to use them without drawing attention. She knew that millions of people were watching, and she wanted her son to enjoy the experience while still being respectful. The Archbishop continued with the sacred rituals while Louis provided his own running commentary in whispers that only his immediate family could hear. He asked questions about why everyone was wearing such fancy clothes and why his grandfather needed such a heavy crown. His innocent observations about the ceremony were both endearing and surprisingly insightful for such a young child. Despite his playful behavior, Louis seemed to understand that something very important was happening to his beloved grandfather. During the most sacred moments of the ceremony, he would become quiet and watch with genuine interest. His natural instincts told him when to be more serious, even though his 5-year-old energy made it difficult to sit still for such a long time. The golden morning light slowly crept through the grand windows of Adelaide Cottage as the most important day in recent royal history was about to begin. Catherine, Princess of Wales, opened her eyes and felt her heart racing with excitement and nervousness all mixed together. Today was Saturday, May 6, 2023, and her father-in-law, King Charles, would finally receive his crown after waiting his entire life for this moment. She quietly slipped out of bed, trying not to wake her husband, William, who was still sleeping peacefully beside her. Catherine walked softly to the window and looked out at the beautiful English countryside surrounding their home. Everything looked so calm and peaceful, but she knew that in just a few hours their lives would be completely different. The whole world would be watching their family today, and she wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. William stirred in bed and opened his eyes to see his wife standing by the window in her silk nightgown. He could tell she was thinking deeply about the day ahead. He got up quietly and wrapped his arms around her from behind, giving her a gentle kiss on her cheek. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, both understanding how special and historic this day would be for their entire family. The first sounds of movement could be heard from upstairs as their 3 children were beginning to wake up. 9-year-old Prince George was probably already awake, thinking about his very important job as one of the pages of honor. He had been practicing for weeks, learning exactly how to carry his grandfather's heavy ceremonial robes during the coronation ceremony. The young prince took his responsibilities very seriously and had asked his parents hundreds of questions about what would happen at Westminster Abbey. 8-year-old Princess Charlotte was likely stretching in her bed and thinking about the beautiful dress she would wear today. She had tried it on several times and loved how grown-up and elegant she looked in it. Charlotte was always excited about special occasions and had been counting down the days until the coronation. She understood that her grandfather becoming king was something very important, and she wanted to make her family proud. 5-year-old Prince Louis was probably already planning some sort of mischief, even though he had just woken up. The youngest Wales child was known for his playful and sometimes naughty behavior during important royal events. His parents loved his natural personality, but they were also a little worried about how he might behave during such a long and formal ceremony. Louis had a way of making people smile with his honest reactions, but today needed to be more serious than usual. Catherine walked toward the stairs to wake the children properly while William headed to the shower to begin getting ready. As she climbed the stairs, she could hear George already moving around in his room and Charlotte humming softly to herself. Louis' room was still quiet, which meant he was either still sleeping or planning something that would surprise everyone later. She gently opened George's door first and found him sitting on his bed, looking out the window with a serious expression on his young face. "Good morning, my darling," she said softly. "Are you ready for your big day?" George nodded and asked his mother if she thought he would do a good job helping Grandpa during the ceremony. Catherine sat beside him and assured him that he had practiced perfectly and would make the whole family very proud. Next, she went to Charlotte's room and found her daughter already picking out hair ribbons to match her special dress. The little princess was glowing with excitement and immediately started chattering about all the important people who would be at Westminster Abbey. Catherine smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm and helped her choose the perfect ribbons for her hair. Finally, she approached Louis' door and took a deep breath before opening it. She found her youngest son still curled up under his blankets with his favorite stuffed animal. When she gently shook him awake, he opened his big blue eyes and gave her the sweetest smile that melted her heart completely. "Today is Grandpa's special day," she whispered to him, and he nodded sleepily before jumping out of bed, ready to start this amazing adventure with his family. Westminster Abbey stood before them like a magnificent castle from a fairy tale as their royal car came to a gentle stop at the famous entrance. The ancient stone building had witnessed the coronations of kings and queens for nearly 1,000 years, and today it would welcome King Charles as he officially became the monarch of the United Kingdom. Thousands of beautiful flowers decorated every corner of the abbey, creating a magical atmosphere that took everyone's breath away. The car doors opened, and the Wales family stepped out onto the red carpet that had been specially laid for this historic occasion. George immediately straightened his shoulders and walked with the confident steps of a future king. His page of honor uniform looked absolutely perfect, and he carried himself with the dignity that his parents had taught him during countless practice sessions at home. Charlotte emerged from the car looking like a real princess with her beautiful pale blue dress flowing gracefully around her. She had practiced this moment many times, but nothing could have prepared her for the amazing sight of Westminster Abbey, filled with so many important people from around the world. She held her mother's hand tightly, but waved confidently at the crowds who cheered loudly when they saw the young princess. Prince Louis stepped out of the car, and his eyes grew wide with wonder as he took in the incredible scene around him. The 5-year-old had never seen so many people dressed in such fancy clothes, and he was amazed by all the soldiers in their bright red uniforms, standing at attention. He stayed close to his father, but could not help looking around at everything with the natural curiosity that made him so lovable. William felt a surge of emotion as he looked up at Westminster Abbey, where his own father had waited his entire life to be crowned. He thought about all the generations of his family who had walked through these same doors and participated in ceremonies that connected them to centuries of British history. Today his children would witness something that they would remember for the rest of their lives. Catherine smiled warmly at the guests and dignitaries who had already arrived for the ceremony, but her main focus remained on her 3 children, especially Louis, who she knew could become overwhelmed by all the excitement and attention. She had prepared special quiet activities to help him stay calm during the long ceremony, and she hoped they would be enough to keep him happy and well-behaved. Inside Westminster Abbey, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation as nearly 2,000 guests had gathered from every corner of the world. Kings and queens, presidents and prime ministers, celebrities and religious leaders all sat together waiting to witness this historic moment. The abbey was filled with the most beautiful music as the choir practiced their final songs before the ceremony officially began. George took his position with the other pages of honor who would help carry King Charles' ceremonial robes during the most important parts of the coronation. The young prince had practiced his role so many times that he knew exactly where to stand and when to move. He felt nervous, but also incredibly proud that his grandfather had chosen him for such an important job on this special day. The ancient walls of Westminster Abbey seemed to whisper stories of all the kings and queens who had been crowned in this same place over the centuries. Charlotte looked around in amazement at the beautiful stained glass windows and the incredible architecture that made her feel like she was inside a magnificent cathedral from one of her favorite storybooks. Louis held tightly to his father's hand as they walked through the abbey toward their special seats in the front section. The little prince was trying his best to walk properly and behave like a grown-up, but he could not help being excited by all the amazing sights and sounds around him. The organ music was so powerful and beautiful that it made him feel like he was part of something truly magical. As the family took their designated seats, Catherine felt her heart beating faster with anticipation. She looked around at all the distinguished guests and felt grateful that her children would be part of this incredible day that would be remembered throughout history. The coronation of King Charles was about to begin, and they had the best seats in the house to watch it all happen. As bedtime approached, William and Catherine helped their children get ready for sleep while continuing to talk about all the incredible moments they had shared as a family. They tucked each child into bed with extra hugs and kisses, knowing that this day would forever be one of their most precious family memories that they would treasure for the rest of their lives. Before turning off the lights, Catherine reminded each of her children how proud she was of how beautifully they had behaved and how much they had contributed to making Grandpa Coronation Day absolutely perfect. She told them that someday they would tell their own children and grandchildren about the day they watched their great-grandfather become king and how special it felt to be part of British royal history. The coronation had been perfect not just because of the ancient ceremony and magnificent traditions, but because it had shown the world that the royal family was at its heart simply a loving family sharing important moments together, just like families everywhere. As the children drifted off to sleep, they dreamed about crowns and carriages and the incredible day when their grandfather became king. Louis, however, had reached his absolute limit of formal behavior after the long ceremony and journey through London. The 5-year-old began making his wonderfully silly faces again, much to the delight of the photographers and the crowd below who could see his antics on the giant screens that had been set up throughout the area. His playful personality was shining through despite all the formal protocol. William and Catherine exchanged knowing looks as they watched their youngest son return to his natural, entertaining ways. They had expected this moment and were actually relieved that Louis had managed to behave as well as he had during the ceremony itself. His silly expressions and playful behavior were exactly what made him so lovable and authentic. The balcony appearance continued for several more minutes as the royal family waved and acknowledged the incredible support from the British people. King Charles looked down at his grandchildren with obvious pride and affection, knowing that they represented the bright future of the monarchy he had just officially inherited. As the golden sun began to set on this absolutely incredible coronation day, the Wales family finally made their way back home to Adelaide Cottage, feeling completely exhausted, but also filled with overwhelming pride and joy from everything they had experienced together. The children were practically bouncing with excitement despite being tired from the long day, as they chattered nonstop about all the amazing things they had seen and done during their grandfather's historic ceremony. The very first thing all 3 children did when they walked through their front door was kick off their formal shoes, which had been pinching their feet after hours of walking and standing during the ceremony and celebrations. Prince George immediately started telling his parents about how proud he felt when he successfully carried out his duties as a page of honor without making any mistakes. The 9-year-old had been nervous about his important role, but now he felt incredibly accomplished and mature. Princess Charlotte could barely contain her excitement as she spun around their living room, still wearing her beautiful pale blue dress and talking rapidly about all the distinguished guests she had seen at Westminster Abbey. She was particularly impressed by all the queens and princesses from other countries who had worn the most gorgeous gowns and sparkling jewelry. The 8-year-old felt like she had stepped into a real-life fairy tale. Little Prince Louis had returned completely to his normal energetic self and was running around the house making airplane noises and reenacting his favorite parts of the day. He pretended to put a crown on his stuffed animal's head and practiced the serious face he had tried to make during the ceremony. His parents laughed as they watched him process the incredible day through play and imagination. William and Catherine collapsed together on their comfortable sofa, feeling grateful that they could finally relax after the intense pressure of ensuring everything went perfectly during such an important public event. They watched their 3 children with amazement as they realized that all of them had handled the day beautifully in their own unique ways. Each child had contributed something special to making the coronation day memorable and meaningful. Catherine felt particularly proud of how well she had managed to keep Louis relatively calm and well-behaved during the long ceremony. She had been worried that his natural playfulness might create problems during such a formal event, but instead his authentic reactions had charmed millions of people around the world. His silly faces and honest responses had actually made the ceremony more relatable and human. The family spent the evening looking at photographs and videos from the day on their tablets and television, laughing together at some of the funnier moments and marveling at how grand and beautiful everything had looked. They saw themselves from the perspective of the cameras and realized just how historic and special their participation had been in this once-in-a-lifetime event. George studied the pictures of himself performing his page of honor duties with serious concentration, wanting to remember every detail of how he had helped his grandfather during the most important day of his life. The young prince already understood that this experience had prepared him for the royal responsibilities he would have throughout his life, and possibly the crown that would someday rest on his own head. Charlotte giggled with delight when she saw photographs of herself waving from the Buckingham Palace balcony, surrounded by her family and backed by the cheering crowds. She had never imagined that so many people could gather in one place just to celebrate something so special. The 8-year-old princess felt incredibly lucky to be part of such an amazing royal family.